Good afternoon, Jennifer.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I understand you want to share the story of one of your students.
She's an amazing person. You know, I thought that I had lost contact with her because she left the class last year because her husband was diagnosed with cancer. She had a 2-year-old and she was pregnant. And so it was just, think about it, just like on this slide, she was just like this. She was just, you know, she was just barely having the energy to take care of things at home.
Wow.
And couldn't continue in the class. You know, I would occasionally send her texts, you know, and most of the time she didn't answer. So I didn't know if she was following along. But at the end of September, oh my goodness, right out of the blue, I get this text from her telling me that she has her interview set for October 7th.
Wow.
You know, we first talked about, you know, do you have your folder and what items, you know, always in preparation for an interview, I always tell, okay, let's prepare your folder. So she had her folder. We had already talked, you know, in every citizenship class, I always talk about this. But anyway, we went over what are the elements, what needs to go in that folder, and kind of the order, organizing it, right? So we organized her folder. We talked about, you know, you need to wear some nice clothes, you know, something's appropriate for the occasion here. And she said, yeah, I'm ready in that part. And then she said, she didn't say it, she sent it to me saying, you know, teacher, I have this homework. Imagine she'd been holding on to this homework for a year. She said, but there were some of the things that I couldn't answer. And so I was amazed. I was quite happy to answer her, to kind of give her the answers. Obviously, a person who's so interested in your class and so serious, you know, it's always a pleasure to help them. So let's see, can you?
I want to ask you.
Okay,
I know she was working a lot, but when was she responding to your texting? When was she texting?
That was the most amazing thing, Jennifer. It was 2 in the morning when she was feeding, right? She was nursing her daughter, her new daughter. Can you imagine? You know, most people, you know, sometime during the day, but her text came, you know, I read it in the, you know, later in the day, but her text was sent at 2 in the morning. And she said, this is the only time that I have to study. Lord have mercy. You know, this is homenaje. This is homage to people who are really, really determined.
Yeah.
They have a lot of things to do and they are still going to go forward. I mean, that's just, I'm so proud of her that in the face of all these things, it was horrible, it was daunting. When she learned the terrible news about her husband, you know, he began to go through chemotherapy, she needed to be there. She had a 2-year-old who, of course, doesn't understand everything that's going on with dad. And then she was pregnant. And so how she could keep it all together is really amazing. It's an amazing story.
So but what kind of questions did she send you, or what kind of text?
Interesting. The ones that she had were about the vocabulary on the N400. Usually that's the sticker. It's by far the most difficult facet of really, people can learn the 100 questions and they can learn their, you know, practice their dictations and their readings. But usually the vocabulary is pretty daunting. So she sent me this paper at 2 in the morning where she had answered most of the questions, but she had like 5 or 6 that she couldn't answer. So go ahead and show us your next slide, because I think you've really organized your slideshow to coordinate here. All right, so the first question was on the worksheet. I had put heroin, right? And the job of the students is, now tell me what is the word that's on the application. So the word is not heroin on the application, but the word is narcotics. And a lot of times students don't remember, well, what does narcotics refer to? So I quickly on her worksheet, I wrote in narcotics in that line. Go ahead, give us the next one. The next one, she said, oh, what is guns? Because she didn't know what, and I said, well, guns is how we understand the word weapons, because the word on the application is weapons. Have you ever taught people to use weapons? Have you ever sold these weapons, etc.? So what you need to know is the word weapons. Okay, next one. Okay, the next word she asked me was believe. And these people in this slide believe we should tear down our government. And the question is, do you advocate the destruction, right, of the United States? So so I wrote in there advocate, because that's the word that they're looking for. That's on the application. Okay, next one. And this one is, I had on there discriminate. It's where a person discriminates against another person. And that word is persecute. And you can see the shoe is on top of this person, right? And so they are persecuting this person. So the word on the application is persecute. And there you go. And the final one that she didn't know was, I had written on the worksheet, so many people. And that's another way to explain genocide. The word that's on the application is the word genocide. If the person if you have participated in genocide, right? And so what did I do? I answered her questions. I had reminded her about what goes in the folder. I reminded her that she needed to decide what she was going to wear. And I sent the text back to her, right? Then she came back and she had another text. She sent me another text several days later. And in this text, she asked me, you know, I've had a child born.
Oh, 1 minute, please. There was one more vocabulary term you had.
Oh,
One
yes,
was related to genocide.
Oh, yes, you are so, Jennifer, I'm so sorry. You are so right. The final term that was on the worksheet was Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler is an example of a Nazi. And on the application, they ask you, have you ever helped or did you participate with the Nazi government?
Yeah.
Did you support, right? And so you are so right. I am so sorry.
I really hate this slide because as a German American, people associate Hitler with the Germans. And so, but of course he's associated with genocide and we have to talk about it and we can't forget, because if we forget, we do it again. So.
Well, and most of the time the students, actually, most of the students know this name, Hitler. So it's also, you're looking for vocabulary that's going to be conversant to them, something that they can associate with, you know?
Okay, so then you talked about the next text. So
Yeah.
what was the question, the next text?
So I sent this worksheet back with the answers. And then a couple of days later, she sent me another text. And in this text, she said, teacher, I want to know what to do. Do I mention that I have a newborn? Because when I sent the application, my baby wasn't born. And the second thing is, I've made 2 trips out of the country since I sent the application. And in both cases, I said, yes, no, go back to the other one. Can you go back to this one with the yes? Okay, so I said, no, you need to advise the officer that you have a newborn, because the job of the officer is to update your application so it's 100% correct on the day of your interview. So, you know, I said to her, you need to write down on a piece of paper the name of your child and the date that she was born, and that she was born in Santa Monica, right, in California, all right? So you need to provide that information to the officer. Often it's better not to just rely on you orally saying that. And so I always suggest that you write it down so that either you can put it against the plastic wall that would separate you and the officer, or you can pass the paper underneath the wall, depending on what the officer prefers. And the second thing, go to the next slide. Yes. This is representative of her trips outside the United States. This is the border, right? And I said, yes, indeed. You need to write down on another piece of paper the information about the 2 extra trips that you took after you submitted your application. You need to write the date that you left the United States, the date you returned, where did you go, and how many total days you were outside, right? So that's the same form of information that you gave on your application about the other trips. You just need to include these trips on there. Okay. And then a final question, actually, at this point, she said, do you think I could call you? And so we spoke, not at 2 in the morning, at 10 in the morning. But anyway, she asked me, you know, I'm nursing. I'm going to leave my child at home, but we don't know how long the interview is going to take. And so for a nursing mom, normally you would take a pump, right? So that you could pump the breast milk, all right? So she asked me, do you think I can take this? And I hooed and hawed, and I said, let me ask Jennifer, because you're the person who knows, you're the expert who knows everything. But between Jennifer, when I talked to Jennifer, we decided that she should go ahead and take the breast pump.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we hope that the guard didn't say anything. In this case, that's the way it was. She took her breast pump. She went to the guard. She went through the metal detector. Nothing was said. However, she was asked to remove her shoes, but nothing was said about the breast pump. So she went up. In Los Angeles, you have to go through security. Then you go up to the elevator to the 8th floor. Her appointment was on the 8th floor of the federal building in Los Angeles. She looked for her room, right? Because there's several citizenship rooms there. But she went to her room, and then in the waiting room, she was fingerprinted and photographed, and she went and sat down. And it was about 20 minutes before the officer came and called her name. He just called her name. He was pretty much peremptory. He didn't say too much. He just called her name. He said hello and turned around and said, follow me, right? So she followed him to his office. Normally I tell my students to stand up. She stood up, and then the officer told her to sit down. And you always have to follow what the officer says. So she sat down. The officer then introduced himself. And then he said, okay, now will you stand up? Because he was going to give her the oath, so that she could promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help her God. So she did that. She sat down, and the interview began. The very beginning of the interview was the 100 questions, and I'm just going to go over quickly the 6 that he asked her. She had an amazing memory. Most of my students can remember, but she could remember her reading. She could remember her dictation. Oh my goodness, she had amazing memory. All right, so the first question was, we elect a U.S. Senator for how many years? 6, right? Senator, 6. That's why I tell my students. All right, what is the highest court in the United States? The Supreme Court. What is the economic system in the United States? Either market economy or capitalist economy, right? And during the Cold War, what was the main concern of the United States? Communism. Name one state that borders Canada. I don't remember what she said, but there are so many states. New York, Washington, lots of states that border, or Alaska on the other side, right? And what is the capital of the United States? Washington, D.C. Okay, so then the officer said, okay, look at the tablet, and said, please read the sentence that is on the tablet. And the sentence was, George Washington was the first president. Then the officer said, okay, take the tablet and write this dictation. And her dictation was, the people elect Congress. So she wrote that on the tablet. All right. The officer could see what she had written, and the officer indicated that she had passed each of those parts so far. And they went to the application part. He asked her if she worked, if she was married. He asked her the name of her husband, where she was born, what was her nationality, if she had any children, if they were U.S. citizens. And he asked her if she had traveled outside the United States during the last 5 years. And the reason for these trips, of course, at this moment, she made sure to add the 2 extra trips that she had taken just recently in the last year. Then they moved to the section 12 questions. And pretty much he followed there. The interesting thing was the question number, I believe it's number 6 or 7, that talks about income tax reports. And on the application in this part, it says, have you ever failed to file? And then that would be a no question. But he phrased this as a yes question, saying, had she filed her income tax reports? And of course, yes.
Interesting. That's very interesting how she did that.
And let me say, Jennifer, that we have to prepare our students, because it's not uncommon that
Yes.
they framed this particular question as a yes question.
Interesting. Okay, great.
Yes. And then after he did that, then he framed it as the negative question. He asked her, hold on, let me find it here.
Have you ever failed to file your income tax?
And then he said, if there was ever, and the way he framed the question was there ever a time that she had not filed them, right? And that's the no question, right? That's, so when you have, I always try and prepare my students that they might get the yes question. Normally, the person is kind of on automatic and we say no. And when it's happened before, because in the last few people that I've had, it's happened, and the officer stops and kind of looks at them funny and then rephrases the question, and the student says, oh, no. I have always prepared made my report and sent in my income tax report. So they're able, the officer gives the visual clue. So, and then they listen again to the question, and it's either yes, I do my income tax, or no, I have never forgotten, which is what he did over there. In this case, the officer continued through all the Part 12 questions. And then the final ones, which are the yes questions, the 45, 43, 44, 45, 46, the ones that say, do you understand what an oath of allegiance is? Are you prepared to take the oath of allegiance? Will you render service, et cetera, et cetera? She said yes to all those. He didn't ask her any vocabulary questions. Jennifer, I think it's interesting because earlier this year, before the pandemic, I have to tell you that almost universally my students were being asked vocabulary questions. I even had a student come back and had been asked 5 vocabulary questions. Okay.
Wow.
But since the pandemic, in the students that have gone, I've had 3 students go in September, and I'm going to have a 5th student. So one went last week, this student here, and I have another one going next week. I'm waiting to see, but in none of these people so far, they've been asking vocabulary questions.
Yeah,
so
but
if there's a change, we don't know.
I think also your students may be demonstrating through different clues that they understand what
True.
they're agreeing to and disagreeing to.
Yes.
If they were doing it through rote responses,
Memory. Yes, exactly.
they would be
yeah.
questioned. Yeah.
Yes.
Because
right.
the officer really needs to know if the person really understands what they're saying yes to and what they're saying no to.
Well, and that's the reason for the vocabulary, because then they stop, and then they put the student on the line, and that's exactly. But I'm waiting to see. Have you had any students who've had vocabulary?
Yeah, but it's minor vocabulary. It's more like, are you with me? Also, the interviews in San Jose do not go that long. So you have been reporting.
No, this one went 30 to 35 minutes. My students.
Yeah, we're not having that.
I always tell my students when they come back to class, I say, be prepared to tell me how long your interview was. And yes, you're right. There wasn't anyone, I don't think, of the 5 so far, or the 4 so far, that have been less than 20, and hers was 30. I think more common is 30. I think right now, it could be the officers. We don't know what that's, how that's decided. But anyway, in this case, he congratulated her. First, he gave her the white paper that says X, you passed the test, and X, congratulations, and then he congratulated her personally. And he said, please return to the waiting room, because we're going to have you wait there, and we're going to do the swearing in the same day. And so she went back. She waited about an hour. And in her case, she was changing her name. She was. Yes.
Now that's something we cannot do in San Jose and San Francisco.
And this is something that we can always do in Los Angeles. So for the 35 years that I've taught, it's always been possible. People have changed their names. People who, normally I say you can't take on a name. In other words, you can take off a name. If you have 2 last names, you can remove one. If you have several first names, if you have a first name and a middle name, you can decide that you don't want to keep a middle name and just first one. Those are normally the issues that are easily decided. But this is a decision that can be made. And then your certificate would be different from your green card. Your green card would be all of these names that appeared in your birth certificate. And when you get to the citizenship certificate, you have a chance. You might have gotten married, you might have gotten divorced, you might want to change your name. And so there, they give you that option, and they allow it'll appear in the citizenship certificate, the new name. He
Interesting.
asked her to check on the tablet that everything was fine, and then she went out and waited, and she said it was about an hour. She waited about an hour, and then the officer came out and swore in groups of 6 students, giving them their certificate and swearing them in groups of 6. She said there were about 20, 25, so there must have been 4 or 5 groups.
Wow.
That day, yeah, or that morning, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So
it's interesting, and it's nice that people can do it all in once, that they don't have to wait for a swearing-in ceremony, because that's just an extra, you know. It's there are pros and cons, because pro to the ceremony is that your family can be with you, and in this case, you're sworn in. You're all by yourself with all these strangers. You don't know who the other people are, so.
they're not strangers, they're fellow Americans.
Yeah, but you don't know them. It's not like having your family around, because it's a really, here, it's a really important day. Your family is with you. They can take pictures of you. It's just, and it's a really, well, you know, it's a 2-hour ceremony. Here, you know, it takes about 5 minutes, it looks like to me.
Yeah,
You know?
in COVID-19, it's a 5-minute thing.
Yeah.
So
No movies, no talk from the judge.
yeah, you don't want those videos. So
Right for the, just to the essentials there, you know?
yeah, but the thing is that they walk home with their certificate of naturalization, and that's
Well, and they go
really
home. They turned in, you know, they left their home as residents, permanent residents, and they returned home as citizens, just like this young lady in this slide. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's an amazing thing. It is
So
an amazing thing.
I hope that brings some love and security and good things
Amen.
to her family.
So
Yeah.
true, so true.
Her family sounds like they really need all the help they can get. So.
And she's an amazing person. That to think that all of those things in her life didn't smack her down. You know, she continued. She just went ahead. She just went ahead, and that's an inspirational story about how people, in the face of about adversity, you know, just plow on, just go ahead. And
So
that's
I know,
amazing to me.
I know that you taught GED for a long time. Is she eligible to go back and get her GED, or is she more advanced than
Oh, I
that?
imagine she has her I would assume that she has her BA. She was pretty educated. But that GED, I have to just tell you, talking about people who are so motivated. I remember I taught GED in Spanish. I did testing for a long time for the GED in Spanish. And I remember having a student, the most amazing student, really, who she said to me, she said, you know, I'm with my family, cooking, cleaning. I put everyone to bed. My husband goes to bed. And at 12 o'clock, I begin to study for the GED. And that's,
wow.
You know, that desire is an amazing, not all of us have that, but that's an amazing, it's just, you're in awe of people like that who have that much will, because it's will. I mean, you know, she had to have been tired, just like Anna here would have been tired, but they just forge ahead. They have a goal, and they are going to see it through. And it's just to be beside people, to know people like that, is just an amazing, you know, it makes you think, oh, Patricia, you can't complain. You know, we cannot complain about what we have to do, because my life is not as difficult as hers. And she just forged, she never complained. Oh no, complaining, I don't think she had time to complain, and she just forged through. But, you know, as I said, in fact, I have to tell you this, Jennifer, she said to me, you know, I'm not as prepared as I would like to be. You know, I haven't been able to, I go over my questions, but not as many times as I'd like to do, right? And I said, you know, you could tell the officer you know, you could say that, you know, your husband has been ill with cancer and you have a 2-year-old and you have now a newborn, and that you just haven't been able to study as much. And she said, oh, no. I don't want him thinking that I'm asking.
Yeah, I agree with your student 100%, because the number one, it will burden the officer and they can't show sympathy, and that causes problems for the officer. Officers are very sympathetic, but they can't show favoritism, or they can't give somebody a break.
Yeah.
So the thing is if she's strong, that helps the officer to do her job. And if she's strong, that's going to be even a better role model for her family.
But it's an amazing thing, Jennifer. When you're beside people like that, it just, you know, not everyone has such burdens. I mean, I just look at her husband is out of the woods. He's finished his chemo. And, you know, we're just hoping, you know, it's counting the 5 years and hoping that he's cancer free during those 5 years, you know. And I just said, that I was sure, you know, I was just, you got to keep a positive frame of mind and just go ahead, you know. And that, imagine she had taken this step, and in the face of all this adversity, she was able to go forward and complete this goal, this amazing thing. You know, it's just awe-inspiring. We have people in this country that are so amazing. They are so amazing. Their stories are, you know, woo. Anyway, I'm just so glad I could share it with you, because she is just an amazing person. She is just, you know, and I'm so glad that everything worked out for her, you know. And mostly I'm glad that her husband is well, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that he's going to stay that way for the next 5 years. So
I have a question for you. If I know you're in the Los Angeles area, if people are interested in joining your class, how can they do that?
Oh, Jennifer, what I want to do, can you put the registration form? Let me just say, any student is welcome. We have an online class. We are live. So you have to be willing. As a student, you need to be there. It's not recorded, so you can't do it after the fact. You need to be available during the hours of the class. And I have 2 classes, one on Mondays at noon, 12 noon to 2:30. And on Tuesdays, between in the evening from 6 to 9. It's a little longer, but you are welcome to attend. The first thing that you have to do is register in the class. You don't need to be in Los Angeles. I asked the secretary and she said no, that you don't need to be. All right, this is my email. You know, I'm gonna, if I give you the register, because there's a direct line to register, and so I'd really rather than having them write to me.
Go ahead.
But I don't know what it is. I have to give it to you. I'm really sorry.
You know what? If I have, okay, let me clear this out. I would like to say that for the students, if you're interested in your class, if you can check the show notes. Okay, check the show notes and I'll have all the information here. I can't put it up here right now, but it will be in our show notes.
Right.
Okay.
That's
so
fine.
Anyway,
I will give it to you. You know, it's very simple, and that way they can just register. And if they have any trouble, the phone number of the secretary is there, and the secretary will help them. So either way, they can register, and then they just come. They would be given the Zoom link so that they could come and join us. They would be ever so welcome, and they would hear, because part of the class is to hear people's experience, right? So that as people go, for example. Azrat is the next person. She's going on Wednesday. And Azrat will come to class in 2 weeks and talk to us about what her experience was. Obviously, Anna was not in a class, right? She was at her home. But most of my students are in a class, and they would come, and then there's direct, you know, you're directly interacting with the students, because the students, as time goes on, they're accumulating all of this vicarious, right? There's experience of the other students. Yours is going to be different, but there'll be some parts that are the same. And so we learn from everybody else. And so when you finish, when it's your turn, you will have received all of the experience from the other students, and you'll have an idea. Then your responsibility is to come back to class and share your experience, right? You have received this experience from your colleagues, from your classmates, and now when you go, it's your job to share it with everybody else, you know? because nobody's interview is going to be the same, but it gives students an idea of what their experience might be like.
Okay. So any final thoughts? Otherwise,
I
I love
everybody
you.
good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Students, study hard. Check the show notes for all our links. Mwah. I'll see you guys later, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.